Good evening. I'd like to call our board meeting to order and ask the treasurer to call the roll.
President Baker.
Present.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Vice President Cole. Ms. Gibbs.
Here.
Ms. Hudson. Mr. Peretti.
Here.
Ms. Reyes.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I would like to now ask Alex Davenport from Centennial High School and Grace Davenport from Ridgeview Middle School to come forward to the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, please be upstanding.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you know, it's rare that we meet any day other than Tuesday, but as spring break is just coming to an end, we met today. Unfortunately, we don't have the same weather that we had last evening, so hopefully you didn't have to come through too much snow. Let me briefly read through our agenda so we know the work before us. After we adopt our agenda, we'll take public comment. We do have 2 speakers signed up to provide testimony this evening. After that, we will hear from our interim superintendent, our internal auditor, and our treasurer on any reports that they may have. We will then have a discussion on business advisory councils, after which we will take up our consent agenda. The board will then have announcements and share points of pride, after which we will recess into executive session. Having said that, the chair will entertain a motion that we adopt the agenda. Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Peretti.
Yes.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to public comment. So we do have 2 individuals signed up this evening. Each speaker has 4 minutes. You'll see a timer on the screen. When I call your name, I'll ask you to come to the podium and begin your presentation, and I'll ask that you do please conclude within the 4-minute time limit. The first speaker, Wesley Fullen, topic, Proposal 13.7 to grant the authority to enter into a purchase of service agreement with the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Board action. Consider the proposal. Good evening. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, sir. How are you?
I'm well. Before you begin, I'd like to ask all members of BRED to stand with you, just to show that they are here with you. Thank you for being here this evening. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, good evening, President Baker, Treasurer Bahoric, Internal Auditor Smith, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent Stanford. My name is Wesley Fullen, and I am joined by fellow members of the BRED organization at 404 South 3rd Street in Columbus, Ohio. We are here on behalf of our children, families, teachers, and community members who have shared their experiences with the current zero-tolerance climate in our schools. Our goal is to ensure a safe environment where teachers can teach and children can learn. Our concerns that we have heard from all 40 of our congregations, have been confirmed during our research over the past year and a half. Too many fights, too much bullying, classroom disruptions, a huge number of out-of-school suspensions, all feeding the school-to-prison pipeline. But we have also found ways to address these concerns, to reduce misbehavior, narrow the racial discipline gap, and optimize instructional time. Through our research, we learned that restorative practices has been shown to foster relationships and improve school climate overall for both students and staff. We saw the positive effects of this firsthand in Pittsburgh. We heard from teachers and staff who had been trained by the International Institute of Restorative Practices about how these practices have transformed not only their classrooms, but also their relationships with the students and students' relationships with each other. We have appreciated working with both the Columbus City School Board and the administration as we explored best practices to create a better school climate. We are confident that restorative practices is the best way to do this, and that this training by the International Institute of Restorative Practices would be a valuable first step in creating this culture change. We understand that these changes do not happen overnight, so after initial training, we anticipate an ongoing effort with the school district to ensure that restorative practices are implemented with fidelity. We believe the program should be monitored with specific benchmarks and additional support to ensure its success, and in turn, the success of our children and teachers. We look forward to seeing the strategic plan to implement and integrate this practice into Columbus City Schools after this initial training has taken place. We would also like to give a special thanks to Cheryl Ward and other administrators who have worked on the proposal being voted on tonight. We hope to congratulate the board and administration for taking this first step toward improving the climate in Columbus City Schools. We look forward to working with you on a plan that will help our district embrace the whole school implementation of restorative practices. We also repeat our invitation to attend our Nehemiah Action at 7 p.m. on Monday, May 7th. At the action, we look forward to acknowledging those board members who have already confirmed, Board President Baker and Vice President Cole, members Gibbs and Peretti, and any other board members and Columbus school personnel in attendance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here this evening. Are there any clarifying questions from board members, Mr. Peretti?
Thank you, sir, for coming in. And like, I had a great conversation with your team when you a few weeks ago. Could you briefly just sort of explain to me? So we have a couple different sort of approaches with the end game. So the end is trying to decrease harsh discipline actions, getting to the student early. What's the difference between restorative justice and some other systems that we have sort of when it comes to, discipline issues and things like that in Columbus City Schools, PBIS and things like that?
A lot of the things that we see in the school systems and that we understand are reactive. Something happens that is not supposed to happen, and there are reactionary steps taken to try to bring somebody back to what we consider to be normal. Restorative practices it's a paradigm shift, a cultural change in the way that we approach how we relate to each other. What you see is you create an environment where students and teachers and staff learn how to respect each other, and they model that in various ways. One of the most common ways is what they call circles. You'll get in a circle at the various grade levels. In Pittsburgh, we saw K through high school using circles for various types of not only discipline after the fact, but to reinforce lessons. We saw kindergartners telling each other what they liked about each other. Can you imagine if kids are coming into a school building at a young age and they are learning how to talk and respect each other and respect their teachers and respect each other, and that's given back? What you see is a shift in attitude. You get away from a lot of the negative behavior. What we saw in the high schools was that the high school students took responsibility to make sure that people transferring in from other schools, hey man, this is how we do things here. Let us work with you to understand how we do things here, so that everybody gets ownership. And you've got a safe environment. You've got an environment where people are trusting the staff and the other students and the teachers. We heard of a story where a little girl that comes from what they call a trauma environment, where she felt safe enough to express how she was feeling, that they were able to intervene in what looked to be a possible suicide attempt of a very young student. So you're getting ahead of it. You're doing it before rather than after.
I appreciate that, and it just reminds me something that we've talked about as a board, and this is related to it. So it just got me going. we had talked about this before, having an academic committee sort of where we're looking at various metrics that make up what's going on in the district. Instead of waiting until the end of the year saying, what's going on with this, this, and this, having a sort of committee that sort of frames the goals or strategic plans that we're doing anyways already, frames that up in the beginning of the year that we get together and we set that up. But also, as it goes through the year, we also have to evaluate our direct reports. And this would sort of kind of set that sort of framework. What other things are in there, state report card data, internal metrics, third grade reading guarantee, things like disciplinary issues, so we can start tracking these things more. And I know it's something that we've been sort of bouncing around back and forth for the last year or so, but this reminds me of another one of those key things that we should be able to monitor, look at, and see what the strategies are and how it impacts student performance. So I really just want to say thank you very much for coming in and making this possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions from board members this evening? Seeing none, Mr. Fullen, thank you very much for being here. And I'll say what I always say. I'll say what I always say. I know that many of you came here specifically for that, to hear that speaker. So you may feel free to leave at any time without guilt. That's perfectly fine. You're more than welcome to stay the whole meeting. That's up to you. All right, let's move on then to our second speaker, Kim Mason. Topic is communication. Board action is respond. Ms. Mason, good evening. Welcome.
My name is Kim Mason, and this is my first year as a Columbus City School parent, and my topic is communication. Good evening, board. Initially, I was asked what I would like from this board, and I'm proposing the following. This board expressed to me and the viewers watching what strategies or models will be revised and implemented to ensure any and all.
Can't hear you well.
Can you hear me now?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay, do I get like 5 more seconds on the clock then?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll start from the beginning. Initially, I was asked what I would like from this board. I am proposing the following. That this board express to me and the viewers watching what strategies or models will be revised and implemented to ensure any and all communication efforts between the public and this board are carried out more effectively. When you brainstorm, implement communication efforts to be centered on effective planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, and budgeting. Or is it in my best interest in the viewers watching to budget effectively and find a school system which will communicate and respond? Parents who believe in the public school systems, parents who are taxpayers, parents who are helpers at their school should not feel blindsided, neglected, cheated in their support and the school board's vision support. A world vision statement, a world-class model of public education that prepares members of our communities to reach their full potential. Communication, defined by Merriam-Webster, is the process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviors, or a technique for expressing ideas effectively. As I review the biographies of each member on this board, I notice that everyone has a bachelor degree or baccalaureate service, which means at some point, everyone on this board has completed a course in communication. As a taxpayer, I can recall the amount of literature I received in 2016 when the Columbus City School and Board requested the support of issue 57. Every time I turned around, a flyer, a postcard, a broadcast was blasted on the importance and excellence of issue 57. And since levy inception, the dialogue between Columbus City Board, the school board, and this public has been the following. I personally feel that the communication between the Columbus City Board and the public is kindred with our school report card, failing. On numerous occasions, I've reached out to offices within this board, and the communication has been nonchalant. However, today I received special attention. I received 3 phone calls regarding my topic and what I would want from you guys in the same day. Wanting to know what concerns I have regarding the communication, what resolutions I am seeking, I am a bit concerned why this affirmation was needed. If I provided it up front, it should have been communicated effectively. Looking at the recent reports from the beginning of this year, I and the public have watched the news and were informed that Columbia City Schools will experience a proposed budget cut due to the state shortchanging them on funding. Then last week, the public and I were informed on the Columbia City Schools will restart the superintendent search immediately because of evidence that was found through the school board discussing parts outside or in private, and that it could result in state penalties and fines. As a parent, did Columbus City and this board, the school board, have any intention of informing the public beforehand and believe that it was the best interest to receive this information secondhand? As a taxpayer, did Columbus City School Boards have any intention to inform the public of this initial cushion from 57, which was proposed from the state board funds that were allocated? When I looked at what was allocated as far as board members and what you guys are compensated, it says that for 7 members, you should have received $80 per meeting, which is $560. So presently, this board today has had 7 meetings, including today, which is $3,920. This board will still have 14 meetings left. So that is $7,840. What are your internal budget cuts that you will be implementing to help strengthen this system? Effective communication is known through understanding the emotion and intentions behind this information. It seems that the Columbus City Board and School is limited on its use of effective communication and believes that a patched format is effective when dealing with the public. You cannot sit here and tell me that you do not feel that the public support is dwindling and that our lack of trust as well, and that the proposed communication between Columbus City Schools and the public is suffice. In conclusion, you may feel that I've judged you in your position unfairly, but as the public, I can only judge the actions in which I see. And communication is an action. I urge you to review your communication model, become more transparent in your communication with the public, and not push parents, teachers, and students like me away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mason. Are there any clarifying questions for Ms. Mason? Ms. Gibbs, this is a clarifying question for Ms. Mason.
It is. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to address us. So I was trying to take notes on your concern with very detailed communication. Tell me exactly could you restate for us, what exactly would you like us to do with communication? Are you saying that you feel like we should have more communication with parents or more communications with the public? I want to make sure
Overall,
I understand.
Yes,
Okay.
parents and the public. So since I've been part of the school system, and I at least can say with my principal, when there wasn't as much communication, I addressed that issue. And since then, any and all that has needed to be communicated has come out, and he's made the changes. Mm-hmm. So when I look at things, I shouldn't have to turn on the news and find out that this is something that's going to be impacting, because that impact at the top level trickles down to my son going to school.
Okay. This is your first year in the district?
Yes.
Are you connected to any of our online emails, any of our intercoms, our CCS parent newsletter, or any of our Facebook or social media connections?
So not social media, but when I've reached out in the past, before I didn't come to that meeting, and that was my concern, communication beforehand, because when I signed up for these things, it said that I was signed up, received a confirmation, but nothing else manifested.
Okay.
And that was between not only just this, but if I think about busing, anything. So communication within itself, when I try to reach out to these sources, it might have been a systematic glitch, and technology is a flaw itself. But when I go back to the issue of the levy, I can open up my mailbox and see a postcard or something in there all the time.
Mm-hmm. I wish we had levy money all the time.
Fair enough.
But what
I wish
I
I had
will
tax
say,
money too.
Yeah, what I will say, because I wanted to make sure I understood what it is you were asking, and I know that we're going to do some follow-up, and I'm hoping that in the follow-up, and they'll come back and let us know that you get connected to all of the communication. It's not the only time we communicate to the public. We think, some people think we do, too much. Some people think we don't do enough, but I do want to make sure if we are giving communications that you're connected to the app and in all of the vehicles that we have that are available. So I just want to.
So just to confirm, so as I go home and I review all these avenues, that means that everything that I've addressed or concerns should be post-dated on there as well too.
I'm going to say that it is our protocol that someone follows up with you in the next 5 business days, and they are far better at it, and they have the administrative tools to connect you to the communication vehicles that you may not be connected to, the app, the bus app, our newsletter, and all of those things. But that's why I clarified. I wanted to make sure I understood what it is you were asking for, so I can understand how we can follow up to see that your concerns are addressed as best as possible.
Fair enough, but thank you, Ms. Gibbs, but I do feel like 5 days is unacceptable.
Well,
And I'm just saying that's the communication within itself.
we have to
So,
get,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. We got to give them time to work, and right now they're on spring break.
I know.
But
This is my
but
first
it's,
time calling though, but
yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah, but it'll be good. They'll get back with you.
Any other clarifying questions from board members for Ms. Mason? Ms. Mason, thank you for taking the time to come
Thank
down.
you.
We appreciate it. All right, and I do not have any other speakers on my list. All right, very good. Let's move on then. And Treasurer, please note the arrival of board members Hudson and Cole. Thank you. All right, let's move to our interim superintendent report. Dr. Stanford, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Board of Education. Tonight, I would like to start the interim superintendent's report with item 11.1 on your agenda, and that is a resolution recommending members to serve on the Facilities Task Force. As you will see in the resolution, there are a number of individuals that we are nominating as an administration for the board to approve this evening to start the process of reviewing the schools and administrative buildings that might be considered for closing and consolidation. As you may recall, on February 20th, the Board of Education adopted a resolution charging me with the task of pulling together this task force according to Board Policy 7105, and also including the review of administrative buildings along with school buildings in the district. I am happy to say if the board approves this resolution, the task force is set to have its first meeting on April the 12th, which is next Thursday. And that first meeting will be more of an orientation and an organizational meeting for the work that we will engage in between April and this fall. The goal is to have a draft recommendation ready at the end of August and to have a final recommendation to the board by the end of October, beginning of November. While students are out of class this week on spring break, construction crews will finish a major project to restore the iconic cupola atop West High School. The new cupola is a reproduction of the original cast in fiberglass and installed over a structural steel 8-column framework. On top of the impressive new copper roof will sit a reproduction of the original weather vane featuring the school's iconic namesake Cowboys and Pioneer wagon. The copper top was to have been set up today, however, high winds prevented that from occurring. Yeah. The cupola lift is tentatively scheduled for tomorrow, Thursday, again, pending weather conditions. We hope to have everything in place no later than April the 8th before students return to school on April the 9th. To celebrate this cupola's rise, West High School and district leaders are inviting the West Side community, and really the community at large, to join students and staff for a special lighting ceremony on April the 10th, starting at 7 p.m. with tours of the school's Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame champions as an additional feature of this lighting ceremony. Presentations also will be presented on our current student successes. Just before spring break began, I had the opportunity to join more than 2,000 of our Columbus City Schools third graders in celebrating their success on the Road to the Final Four partnership with a huge pep rally downtown as a part of the Final Four weekend celebrations here in our city. And so for those who haven't been paying attention, the NCAA Women's Final Four tournament was here in Columbus last weekend. More than 2,000 of the district's third graders earned a special visit Thursday morning to open up the NCAA Women's Final Four Tourney Town. It was a festival of interactive activities and games, giveaways, basketball contests, and youth clinics inside the Columbus Convention Center. Since November, our third graders have been tracking the minutes they spent reading books, and collectively, they read more than 16 million extra words. And so our communication director, Scott Varner, did some research. That 16 million extra words is enough to fill the Oxford English Dictionary from cover to cover nearly 100 times. The top prize winner went to Parkmore Elementary School for having the most books read, where students read 1.8 million additional words as a part of this initiative. As we all know, a good book has the power to open windows to larger worlds beyond our own, taking us to new places and unlocking our minds to new possibilities. And as a youngster, I can attest that that's exactly what books did for me. How powerful are these partnerships to our students and the district? Well, right now, our third graders are 5 percentage points ahead of last year's pace at meeting and exceeding the requirements of the state's third grade reading guarantee. And we may even finish the year higher than last year. I would like to thank the NCAA, the Columbus Sports Commission, the Second and Seventh Foundation, Reading Plus, Scholastic, and our own Helen Darling, a former Brookhaven and WNBA star, for their support of the Read to the Final Four initiative and the wonderful event last Thursday that they put on for our students. I also want to thank our teachers, our academic staff, our student activities team, and our principals for supporting our students in this wonderful effort. Our spirit of success was also magnified last Thursday during our faith-based leadership fellowship and call to action breakfast. We brought together our faith-based leadership teams from across the city to celebrate existing partnerships, deepen current relationships, and to build new ones. By working together, we want to ensure that our students are on track to succeed in the classroom and at the high school, and to address the social, emotional needs of our students that can inhibit their ability to focus on academics in the classroom. We've asked our partners that they pledge to partner with one of our 46 schools that don't currently have partners. 2, increase their commitment at their current schools. 3, provide mentors and reading buddies for next school year. 4, meet with our building principals to find out how they might best be able to help service and provide opportunities for our students. And then lastly, to adopt a school and to host a beautification day in the fall. I also shared with Brotherly Love 3 expectations for their work with our district. First, I shared with them that I cannot and will not allow them to proselytize religion in our schools when they work with our students and families. Second, I shared that they must comply with the board's anti-discrimination policy in working with our students and our staff. And then lastly, I shared with them that they must accept all of our students, regardless of their backgrounds, with brotherly, charitable love, which respects, honors, and values each person as a human being. In the following weeks, we'll host a fellowship for our building principals and faith-based organizations to develop meaningful partnerships that will help our students, their families, and communities to be successful. And speaking of beautification and partnerships, this Saturday, more than 1,000 Vineyard Church volunteers, including our own Kwesi Kamban, have already signed up to help beautify several of our schools on the northeast side of the city. The kickoff will be at Northland High School which is 1919 North Cliff Drive at 10:30 a.m. this Saturday, April the 7th. If you can be there for the kickoff, that would be wonderful to, again, be a part of this really exciting opportunity. As we all know, today marks a pivotal moment in our nation's history. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel. We have prepared a brief commemoration this evening to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy. This historical pivotal moment is especially significant for me because my roots are in Montgomery, Alabama. My parents and family members were a part of the Montgomery bus boycott in the 1950s. 50 years ago today, one of our nation's and the world's greatest peacemakers was taken away from this earth by a sniper's bullet. It occurred at the Lorraine Motel, which is 450 Mulberry Street in Memphis, Tennessee. And thankfully, that location is now a National Civil Rights Museum. And so for a tragedy to have occurred on that site, to turn it around and use it to educate people about the life and the successes and the triumphs of Dr. Martin Luther King is a great thing. The legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. encompasses influential decisions, monumental actions, and a steadfast progression for humanitarian rights that reach far beyond the civil rights movement. A leader of all people, Dr. King never chose fear, but always chose courage and determination when fighting for civil rights in the face of oppression, ignorance, and violence. He refused to allow prison, violence, and the threat of death to sway him or to distract him from his mission. Instead, he stood beside his goal of achieving human rights for all through nonviolent protests. Dr. King maintained a vision for a more diverse America where all people enjoyed the benefits of equal rights. Dr. King's leadership contributed to the overall success of the civil rights movement in the mid-1900s and continues to have an impact on civil rights movements in the present. Dr. King loved music, and tonight, as a part of this commemoration, we have two of our students that you've already met, Alex Davenport from Centennial High School and his sister, Grace Davenport, from Ridgeview Middle School, even during spring break, no less, to recite a speech given by Dr. King at the 1964 Berlin Jazz Festival. And so at this moment, I'd like to welcome both of them to come up to the podium and to share with us the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
They're going to join us right here.
Okay.
Dr. Martin Luther King on the importance of jazz. Opening address to the 1964 Berlin Jazz Festival. Jazz speaks for life. The blues tell the story of life's difficulties. And if you think for a moment, you will realize that they take the hardest realities of life and put them into music, only to come out with some new hope or sense of triumph. This is triumphant music. Modern jazz has continued in this tradition, singing the songs of a more complicated urban existence. When life itself offers no order and meaning, the musician creates an order and meaning for the sounds of the earth, which flow through his instrument. It is no wonder that so much of the search for identity among African Americans was championed by jazz musicians. Long before the modern essayists and scholars wrote of racial identity as a problem for a multiracial world, musicians were returning to their roots to affirm that which was stirring within their souls.
Much of the power of our freedom movement in the United States has come from this music. It has strengthened us with its sweet rhythms when courage began to fail. It has calmed us with its rich harmonies when spirits were down. And now, jazz is exported to the world. For in the particular struggle of African Americans, there is something akin to the universal struggle of a modern man. Everybody has the blues. Everybody longs for meaning. Everybody needs to love and be loved. Everybody needs to clap hands and be happy. everybody longs for faith. In music, especially this broader category called jazz, there is a stepping stone towards all of these.
I also would like to bring forward Zach Compston, who is Director of Education and Community Engagement with the Columbus Jazz Arts Group, to make a special announcement and share some exciting news with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Interim Superintendent, President Baker, and the entire board, administration of Columbus City Schools. It's a great honor for me to stand in front of you as Director of Education for Jazz Arts Group. For those of you who may not know the details of our relationship with Columbus City Schools, Jazz Arts Group and Columbus City Schools are, I think, very strong partners. In fact, Columbus City Schools, or Jazz Arts Group, sees Columbus City Schools as its strongest partner in the community in our effort to use jazz and American music as a way to inspire and instill creativity and personal expression, collaboration and teamwork amongst the students from pre-K through lifelong learners. The speech that was read by Grace and Alex really represents something that Jazz Arts Group is trying to extend and improve upon, which is, quite frankly, when you're in the weeds learning how to make music, you don't always stop and take pause to think about the social implications, the cultural implications. You're so headstrong on getting everyone to play a concert B-flat major scale and then begin to improvise on that. But we were very grateful to have an opportunity to collaborate with King Arts Complex and their project MLK 50 Years Later. This is a PNC Arts Alive funded project. Javon Collins and Demetrius Neely came to me and asked how could Jazz Arts Group be a partner. And in doing so, it gave us that opportunity to pause and reflect on the correlation between our art form and its social and cultural impact on all of the history of our country. So I'm proud to announce to you that we're starting next week a residency with world-renowned trumpeter Terrell Stafford. Terrell Stafford is in the Village Vanguard Jazz Orchestra in New York City. He's a professor of music at Temple University. He's been artist in residence at universities and jazz festivals all over the world. He and our own artistic director, Byron Stripling, are close friends and contemporaries, both trumpeters. And Terrell will be gracing the stage of the Lincoln Theater on Thursday, April 12th. But we were fortunate in partnership with King Arts Complex and their grant to be able to do a 5-visit residency out ahead of that concert. So 2 of those 5 visits will incorporate Columbus City Schools. On Tuesday, we will do a classroom lecture with some Fort Hays students, diving into, with the music students, the correlations between jazz and civil rights, and using world-class musicianship to convey that message. Then again, on Thursday, his entire quintet will come in and they will do a performance at Fort Hays for a larger group of students and share their talents to sort of express that hopefulness that Grace mentioned when she was reciting the speech. All in all, what we've learned, both through surveying the public and our own research and hard work as an organization, is that jazz has the power to transform young people starting in pre-K all the way through lifelong learners. The core tenets of improvisation, of teamwork, as the renowned leader Wynton Marsalis would say, it has the ability to transcend all ignorance because we all carry some with us, and this music has the ability to do that. So all told, we've served just this year over 5,000 students from pre-K through high school in Columbus City Schools, and I thank you for the opportunity to do that with both fundraising that we do and also all the support that you provide in doing that as well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Compston? Yes, Mr. Brown.
Just very briefly, I really want to extend thanks. It's wonderful music. Columbus Jazz Orchestra and the Jazz Arts Group do wonderful work here in town, and I thank you for working with our Columbus students. Please extend our thanks to Press Southworth and to Jim Negron and the rest of your board. They're great supporters of the schools in a variety of ways, and this is just one more. So it's an important one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ms. Gibbs.
To the two students who are trying to shrink, you see them just, they got real comfortable hiding. Great job. I want to give you a round of applause. And to say what refreshing words there are. We have heard many of Martin Luther King's speeches, but to connect it to your point of the social and the educational part of jazz and of music, and to make those two come alive is absolutely incredible. You did a great job. There's so many people who can't speak in front of crowds. You did really, really good. And to the Jazz Arts Group, your work is tremendous and it precedes you. And I know many students who've had the opportunity to participate. And I believe there's a Saturday morning class.
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, there's a Saturday morning class. So if a young person or a parent wanted to get involved with the Jazz Art Group, how would they find you and who would they call?
So our website is jazzartsgroup.org, and as far as connecting with our programming, part of it could be connecting us with schools that we don't already go to, and getting involved in communication with Betty Hill, with Unified Arts, and the things that we do with the schools. But with regard to individuals that want to participate, we have a Columbus Youth Jazz program starting in 6th grade through high school that happens at the Jazz Academy on the 4th floor of the Lincoln Theater. We've expanded that to be just beginner level. So if you can just play the fundamentals on your instrument, you can start to improvise all the way through the internationally renowned Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra, which has done touring and everything like that. That program that we host at the Jazz Academy, we also take into schools. So there are a number of touch points through the website and contacting me that, depending on the age level of a student, we can find a way to connect them.
Thank you so much. And just a reminder, a year or two ago, we had the couple to donate millions of dollars of instruments to the district. Is it the Gobies? The Gobies. And so oftentimes we hear people say, are we cutting the arts? Absolutely not. The arts are alive and well in Columbus City Schools, and we celebrate it, and these opportunities provide chances for kids of all levels to get involved. So if your child wants to play an instrument and they don't, there's a pathway. Ask your principal how to do it. We can get an instrument in their hand and get you over to the Jazz Art Group to enjoy some great music. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Let me ask this one last question. Alex and Grace, do you have a parent or guardian here with you tonight? Please stand up and be recognized. So kids who are amazing don't get that way by accident. So, and the child's first teacher is those parents. So having said that, I'd like to ask Mr. Compton and the Davenports to come up front for a photograph really quickly, please. And board members, would you join on this side? You too. Dr. Stanford, does that conclude your report?
Not yet. Just one more thing.
Carry on.
I just want to say real quickly, thank you to the Jazz Arts Group. As they know, and many of you may know, and for those who don't know, the city of Columbus has a very rich jazz history. Many of the most famous jazz artists, made their way through Columbus or started here in Columbus. And there are wonderful books that chronicle the history of jazz in this city. And it's so exciting to see that the Lincoln Theater is back functional as the center for that music to continue to thrive and grow in the city of Columbus. So again, thank you for what you guys do in the city. And lastly, I want to remind everyone that classes resume on Monday, April the 9th. While the students have been out on spring break, we have partnered with the City of Columbus to offer the Schools Out initiative. And again, thank you, Director Johnson, for all of your work and the work of the folks in the Columbus Recreation and Parks Department to make spring break a safe and fun-filled endeavor for our students. The Columbus Recreation and Parks Department is hosting a variety of programs and events during this spring break to provide safe and nurturing environments for our students to have safe and fun activities to engage them over the break. And so it's not too late. Today is just Wednesday. We still have a couple of more days in the week, and so if your kids are looking for things to do, they can find out more information by logging on to www.columbus.gov/schoolsout. Mr. President and members of the board, that concludes my remarks for tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stanford. Any questions from board members for Dr. Stanford? Mr. Peretti?
Well, I just really want to just thank you, on many things on this report. It's just very pleasant to hear all this, I really want to point out the third grade reading guarantee. That has been a focus and a dedication from our staff, from this district, from this board for a few years now, and to continue seeing it grow, even when 2 years ago, or last year, they changed sort of those goalposts right at the last minute to make it even harder. It's good to see that we're continuing to focus on that, continue to focus our wraparounds, what we promise to community, and continue to build collaborations. It's hard for us. On another piece of this report, we talked about the consolidation task force. That's twofold. The first fold is, we have an infrastructure. It's a little unwieldy. We have too many buildings that, quite frankly, that are getting older. And this district, before I got on the board, has done this a lot. But we're going to put ourselves in a good position by making sure that all of our kids have equitable physical resources, and this is that first step. So that's exciting. And at the same time, it also helps us out with our financial, what we need to do for the future and planning. So these partnerships are awesome. Continuing to see the third grade reading guarantee is great, and I'm just really happy to see that we're moving really quickly on this task force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yes, Dr. Stanford.
Mr. President, Mr. Peretti, on behalf of our leadership team, the faculty and staff of our schools, thank you very much. Our people work very, very hard, and they do a great job of putting on different ways of getting our students in front of a book so that they can learn the joys of reading. And so, again, on behalf of them, I do the great part. I get to sit here and talk about this with you all. And so, but the hard work is being done by those folks every day working with our students. And so, on their behalf, thank you very much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Any other comments from my colleagues on the report? Hearing none. Director Johnson, would you like to share anything on the spring break partnership other than just accepting our gratitude? Thank you very much for the partnership.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, very good. Let's move on then to our internal auditor. And sitting in tonight, Mr. O'Connor, is there anything you'd like to share from the office?
Report today from Office of Internal Audit.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here. All right. Let's move on to the treasurer's report. And Mr. Treasurer, if you could keep your report about the same length as the internal auditors, that'd be great.
Thank you, President Baker, members
Pleasure.
of the board. Let me begin by saying I have no report this evening.
Oh, outstanding.
That concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Appreciate that. All right. Any questions for the treasurer or Office of Internal Audit? All right, hearing none, thank you. Let's move on then to, we have a public hearing on reemployment of an employee. And as required by Ohio Revised Code Section 3309, Spot 013, the Columbus Board of Education gave notice on February 6, 2018, that Betty Airy, payroll supervisor retiring from Columbus City Schools effective April 30, 2018, is seeking to be rehired as payroll supervisor effective May 2, 2018. The board further gave notice that it would conduct a public hearing concerning her employment at tonight's board meeting. We will now conduct that hearing. Here are the ground rules. We will invite any member of the public to address the board about Ms. Aries' prospective employment. Following our practice, we will allow each speaker up to 4 minutes to present her or his views. Once we have heard any speakers, the hearing will conclude and the board will consider the employment of Ms. Aries at the appropriate time. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board concerning the rehiring of Ms. Aries? Seeing no one, that concludes the hearing on Ms. Aries' employment. The board will act on it at the appropriate time. Thank you very much. Now let's move on to board matters. And I do believe that Dr. Rausch is here tonight. He is to provide an update on Ohio law as it relates to business advisory councils and some action we as a board will have to take in the near future. Dr. Rausch, the floor is yours. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Baker, Vice President Cole, and members of the board. Initially, I was going to make this a longer presentation, but I figured I can do it probably fairly quickly. So 3 hours was my initial estimate, but I got a few laughs out there. Tonight, very briefly, I want to just kind of run you through what I'm going to discuss tonight. I'm going to provide some context and background for the changes that have occurred to the Business Advisory Councils through the Biennial Appropriations Bill, House Bill 49, through this General Assembly, as well as two key kind of decision points that the board will need to make in relatively short order. Not like we could do it next meeting, but you still have a couple of months to make those determinations. And then some of the timelines and deadlines that the state has imposed as well, so that we're aware of what the landscape is. So just by way of background, very briefly, we already are working with the business community in an advisory council kind of format. Primarily, they're working with career technical education programs. They're meeting with, the issues that they're discussing kind of fit already what's in the statute, appear to align with what's there. Not only do we have a larger stakeholder meeting that they hold annually, but they also, by program area, have a number of smaller stakeholders, smaller advisory groups. For instance, cosmetology has one, carpentry has one, IT, early childhood education, engineering and design, landscape architecture, welding, you kind of get the gist. We have a number of them for our various career technical education programs. They're comprised of members, representatives from a very large cross-section of employers within the district. We also have educators from the district, educators from Columbus State who participate in these as well. So we're already doing a lot of this work. House Bill 49, when it was introduced, and some of you may recall this, Governor Kasich had proposed that every Board of Education would be required to have 3 non-voting representatives from the business community on there. There was a bit of pushback from not only the education community, but also from a few other stakeholders in business members who were parts of boards of education who said this really isn't the way we think we need to do this. So as a compromise, the enacted version kind of expanded the roles of these business advisory councils. And they put a lot more formal structures into place. For instance, there has to be a plan developed, and part of that plan has to have a delineation of employment skills, development of curriculum to instill those skills, changes to the economy and job market, what are going to be the kind of the most likely future jobs, suggestions for developing working relationships between the business community, between education, between labor. These are aspects that have to kind of go at a minimum into this plan. This plan has to be filed annually with the Department of Education. There also then have to be quarterly meetings now. Before there weren't any requirements for meetings or frequency or even kind of structure. Now there's going to be a requirement for at least quarterly meetings between the Business Advisory Council and the Board of Education. So this was enacted as part of the budget bill, went into effect in September. As part of that legislation, the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation and the Department of Education were required to develop guidance. That guidance was issued in December of 2017. An initial draft came out about the middle part of the month, and the official guidance, I think, is dated December 31st. So I mentioned there were 2 things that we really need to kind of discuss and get the board to weigh in on. And the first of those is the creation. What is the advisory council actually going to look like? I've got 4 options. These are options that I've had discussions with Dr. Stanford, Dr. Good previous to him, that I think are valid options for the board. Certainly, if the board has other thoughts and options, those are also possible. Option 1 is to simply use the existing structure. We already are doing this work. Part of the challenge with that is that they're getting together once annually. The smaller work groups are getting together a little more frequently, but once annually we're getting this group together. The other challenge is that it's big. It's 40 plus 50 individuals, which, you know, it's bigger than the Ohio Senate. It gets to be a rather large group as far as the Business Advisory Council. And if they're going to meet with you as a whole, we're going to have to get a bigger space in order to hold those meetings. But we do have a structure in place. They already are largely doing the work. Will those individuals want to continue to do that work if they have to meet quarterly versus this kind of one-time commitment or periodic commitment for their smaller work groups? That would remain to be seen. A second would be to establish a new advisory council appointed by the board. If we were to do something like this, in talking with Peggy and Cleary Potts, our Director of Career Tech and Adult Education, we've had some conversations. We really should look and put into place individuals or appoint individuals that kind of fit the career pathways that the Department of Education's put together. So you'd probably want to have somebody representing that business and finance pathway, construction, engineering, health sciences, hospitality, including then also representative from, I think, probably the larger business community via the chamber, and somebody representing the labor community, whether that's through apprenticeship programs or from one of the building trades or the coalition of the building trades organizations. A benefit certainly to that would be we could keep it a little bit smaller. I mean, I think that rattling off those, we could keep it about 10 to 12 individuals, which is a much more workable size. Part of the challenge, though, is we got to identify those folks, and we've got to get them in front of the board and get everybody's input and get them appointed. Not outside the realm of possibility, not overly complex or complicated. But if we're going to also grab folks from the existing board structure, you may get some overlap and may have some folks reticent to perhaps serve on yet another group if they're already working on existing groups, which is the third one, which is really a hybrid approach. Take individuals from those. That is a challenge that we would have, though, is that you could have folks saying, okay, first of all, who do we select from these smaller groups? That in and of itself, who gets chosen, who doesn't get chosen, why did they get chosen, why did they not? So you get some hurt feelings. You could get some folks who may not want to participate anymore. Again, you get this longer commitment of at least 4 meetings a year. But again, it's a way of kind of blending the two. You already have names. We already know who's serving in these capacities, that we can bring them in. A final or a fourth option, this is one that's been suggested, and it's allowable in the statute, is an enter an agreement with the ESC. By under 3313.82, districts, if they're receiving services and are in contract with an ESC, which we are, can enter into an agreement with that ESC, which all the ESCs are also required to have business advisory councils. So this is another option to which we could avail ourselves. Currently, my understanding, having some conversations with the superintendent of the ESC, of the 28 districts that are members of the ESC of Central Ohio, 18 have already passed resolutions saying they wish to participate. More districts are in the same boat you are right now. They're hearing presentations. They're mulling over what they would like to do next. To date, only Dublin and Chillicothe have said that they do not wish to participate of the 28. And in talking with Superintendent Goodney, the belief is that the rest of those will also participate. Another benefit to this is that we can continue to do everything we're already doing. So all the work that's being done in the career technical education space, they can continue to do and continue to operate. If we go with an ESC approach, you're taking a regional approach. So really, it's an opportunity to really act as a regional player. We're already part of the Compact Workforce Advisory Council. This builds on the work that they're already doing. We're already meeting at least once annually with that group, sometimes twice. They just need to add a couple of other meetings to that. Other benefit is the ESC takes care of all the paperwork. There's going to be a lot more paperwork. We have to check all the boxes, cross all the T's, and dot all the I's to make sure that we're complying with the new requirements under the statute and complying with the guidance put forth by the Department of Education. They take care of all of that. Now, they would come before this board and provide updates periodically. However often you wish to have them come in, whether that's quarterly, whether that's monthly, they could come in and do that. So that is a benefit that certainly exists, is the fact that they're doing the work and they're providing the insight and the input to the board, whatever format you want. Formal presentations, written reports, however you want to do it, that's an option that exists. So that's kind of the first decision point, creation of that advisory council. What do we want it to look like? How should it be structured? How do we want to go forward? The second is this quarterly meeting. Again, the statute says that the board and its business advisory council, or the ESC and its business advisory council, have to have quarterly meetings. Well, option one would be to simply convene a joint meeting. So 4 times a year, this board would have to meet with its business advisory council, whether that's after a meeting, whether that's a separate standalone meeting earlier in the day, in the evening. You know, it may make more sense to do a separate meeting as opposed to trying to tack something on. You get executive sessions, things run a little late. You don't necessarily have your business advisory committee members sitting around waiting. So that's option one. The next 2 options we would need to do a little bit more research with ODE on. Have an existing board committee meet with the advisory council, or simply have a new committee meet with the advisory council. Those are both options. While we may still have to meet with the board in its entirety, a lot of the work could be done during this committee structure, thus reducing the time needed for that meeting. And then finally, if we use the ESC Business Advisory Council, we just have to determine the level of reporting to you, the board. But at that point, that quarterly meeting requirement falls to the ESC. So those are the 2 really big decisions, I think, that's before the board, because as you see here, the upcoming deadlines by June 30th, we got to have that structure in place. What is the structure of the Business Advisory Council going to look like? So by the end of June, that decision has to be made. And then by September 30th, by the end of September, the plan needs to be constructed. So that plan needs to be put together and submitted to the Department of Education. There's another statutory requirement, and that's that by March of every year, and the first one is March of 2019, we have to publish our joint statement of our accomplishments. What did we say we were going to do in the plan? What have we accomplished? And we have to publish that. However we see fit. The guidance from the department says put it on your website, get it out, blast it through email, the parent app, report cards, postcards, however you want to do it, but we kind of have to publish a joint statement between the Board of Education and that Business Advisory Council. Again, if we use the ESC, they take care of that piece. So in short, I hope I didn't rush through it too much, but I wanted to provide that context and also let the board know we have a couple of decisions that we need to be making here in the very near term so that we can make sure we're complying with these new requirements. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Rausch. I know there are a couple of board members with some questions or comments. And would it be the expectation of the administration that you would provide to us a recommendation based on feedback you received from the board? All right. Mr. Peretti, I believe you were first.
Just a few things. So we already have business advisory councils established by revised code, correct?
President Baker, to Mr. Peretti, we do through the Career Tech Center, through the Career Tech Education Program, have a very large.
Are they supposed to report to us? I just have never. I know it's been around for a while, but I've never seen anything ever about the Business Advisory Council. And it's just a good example of how the General Assembly changes things every year.
President Baker, to Mr. Peretti, I don't know the direct answer to that. Like I said, they've added all of these new requirements. I'd have to go back and see what the old requirements were as far as how often they needed to report to all of you.
And what sort of,
if that was even a requirement before. They added a lot of this as that compromise for the
and what were some of the
non-appointed.
specifics that they were looking to identify?
So again, very, very briefly, let me grab my notes. They wanted for certain you needed to have a delineation of employment skills. Part of the plan has to have a delineation of what are the employment skills that we're looking for. Curriculum to instill those skills. Changes in the economy and the job market. What are the upcoming kind of jobs of the future, high in-demand jobs that we should anticipate? And then suggestions for developing working relationships between labor, business, in the education community. A lot of this work is already occurring through Peggy, like I said, Peggy Cleary and the career tech folks. You know, we've got the group in place.
Sure.
It's just rather large.
Okay. I mean, this is just the first time that I've seen it, and that's okay. I mean, my initial reaction is it's hard enough to get us together to do anything already. But a lot of these things that we were talking about, it's quite topical because it kind of reflects what I was talking about earlier with academic monitoring and evaluations that we should be doing every year and monitoring, and maybe this could flush into that to keep it at a committee level so we can keep ourselves available. I don't know, it's just my initial thoughts, but really, yeah, I guess we'll just have some more conversation about it.
Thank you, Mr. Peretti. Ms. Gibbs.
Yes, so thank you, Dr. Roush. I just have a few questions for you. Remind us again why this was a good idea. Why did the Senate pass it? Like, how did we get here?
President Baker to Board Member Gibbs. As I mentioned earlier, the governor really wanted to have these non-voting appointed members to boards of education to try to bring a greater nexus of the business community and the needs of business to education. If you also recall, one of the suggestions that were made is in the added introduced version where the teachers were going to be required to have internships or externships during the school year as well. So it was kind of a two-prong approach. One had to do with boards of education, one had to do with teachers. This was what the compromise was that came out of the House. I think in working with the education management groups, they took the business advisory councils that are in law but really have kind of not been used that much. I think statewide they've had varying degrees. Some districts don't have them. Some districts aren't really doing a lot. But the thinking was, or the rationale was, let's use what's already an existing statute and just kind of beef it up, provide some requirements around what they need to do, provide some more criteria as far as what we need to be looking for, what the Business Advisory Council and the board need to be discussing, and then in order to make sure it's actually happening, put in this reporting requirement, these quarterly meetings, and then this annual report, and then this joint statement that's issued.
Okay, I like that, but you said we are already in this work, and I'm sure we are. And then you talked about most of our smaller councils are organized around the different trades, some of which you name. But also those trades historically, minorities and women are underrepresented in those fields. So how diverse is our big council, and how are we ensuring that everybody's getting a voice in these fields?
President Baker to Ms. Gibbs, I do not know the answer to that question. That would be one we'd have to follow back. I don't operate those. I don't know, but I can certainly get a list of who's participating and what they're doing for outreach to make sure we have a broad representation.
Okay. As we consider all of our options, I would like to see who we are currently working with and what exactly they're doing. What is the scope of their work, and how is it representing all fields? And it's coming back to me now when you talked about the teachers doing the internships. And if they're supposed to be the business advisory, can you provide us some of the advice they've given us, not only in those career fields, but the state passed, I think, House Bill 311, where we have to provide financial education to our students. Are these business advisory councils giving us advice in that area as well, in terms of business education and some of those things that we used to tackle in home ec and other classes? We used to learn how to write a check and all of those different things. We called it Quest when I was in school, but is this a council that would also talk about our life skill courses and where business can impact those? I would just want to see what that reach is and to find out how they function. And on the ESC level, the same thing. Do we have people who represent, of course, the businesses in our community, but also our small businesses and minority businesses represented on those councils as well? And are we getting a well-rounded representation of the business community here in Central Ohio? Thanks.
Thank you. We'll get that information.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Mr. Brown, you were next.
Yes, thank you. Just three things briefly. First, a note, this is not the first time that Ohio's been through this. Back in the 80s, a few of us remember those days. There was a push by the governor to put business people on school boards, and that ended up in another compromise in those days. And there were something, I don't remember for sure what they were called, but similar to business advisory councils created. Not surprised to see that kind of idea again. Second was a question, if we choose one course, and I'm not saying that we should just, do one of these without giving it any further thought, does it preclude us at any point from making a change and doing something entirely different? My sense is that we can do that.
President Baker to Board Member Brown, there's nothing in the guidance and nothing that I've seen that says that you decide to do A today and you look back a year later and go, this isn't really working, we want to do B. That's in the board's prerogative to make that change whenever. I've seen nothing that says you're locked into this for life. Not yet anyway. We'll watch to see what the General Assembly does going forward. So.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful and useful to know, especially given the deadlines that we have upon us and some of the other work that's on our plates at the moment that's a very high priority. And then finally, and I wasn't necessarily going to bring this up this evening, but I did send to all of you, my colleagues on the board and to Dr. Stanford, reports that were just issued by Ohio State University economists. Reports, 3 of them from Bill Shkurdy and Fran Stewart, that were really well done. And they were done specifically for a different purpose than the purpose of those was to frame about a dozen questions for the candidates running for governor this year. But they really are much broader than that. And they ask some very important questions about the relationship between schools and work, between education and careers. And I think that as I read them, they provide a really good framework for some meaningful conversation that can be had. I talked briefly with our board president, and my initial thought, and I still think this the same, is that I'd like to at least start dealing with those in a very small way. Almost like a book club, nothing official, not a board activity, but just to get some people that have some interest to start talking about this. And that my sense is that from that, with interest, it could grow and it could help inform what we might want to do with business advisory councils in this whole arena as we go. And I just, because I sent that to you all just this morning, I don't know, who's had a chance to look at it yet or know about it. But I think that they've really provided a nice framework to begin addressing those kinds of very important questions. And I don't think we have the time or the ability to focus on this timetable to accomplish anything much with that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Vice President, you were next.
Actually,
It's fine.
are you sure?
Yeah.
I just had just a quick idea because you actually kind of stole my thunder, Board Member Gibbs, because my concern was also about small business inclusion where it was. But I kind of see some dots connecting here for opportunity for us to consider with this type of advisory committee. The first is operations. That then connects, that this Business Advisory Council connects to The second is more curriculum-based with financial literacy and also College Credit Plus. I think there's a unique opportunity there to connect those dots that then also connect to professional development. So I see operations, I see academics, I see professional development, and connecting those dots. Perhaps we can look at our matrix and figure out where this relationship with this Business Advisory Council could make some sense.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. And then Ms. Hudson.
Not to repeat the very good comments, Dr. Rauscher, what I like, I think just from a red tape standpoint, I think the ESC option seems to make sense, but also because of the regional workforce development thinking. I mean, I think it connects Columbus City Schools to what's next in the region. What I wasn't seeing in this, what I would appreciate, I think it's been reflected somewhat in the comments, is, you know, how do we integrate this with our curriculum, not just the Career Center, but the curriculum, so that Ms. Gillison and other folks, everybody knows, like, this is what's next, and this is what employers want when our kids, students graduate. How are they going to get ahead? And I think, to Ms. Gibbs' point, if we would work with the ESC, I think it's to say, how is your Business Advisory Council model going to serve the underserved? How is it going to help think about connecting, especially women and minority graduates, to those new opportunities of the future? But I think it's that integration that I know is tough in just a few bullet points, but that would be, I think, the fulsome picture. But ESC is kind of my vote, I think, in terms of how to get us started.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from board members? Board Member Gibbs?
Yeah, President Baker, so how are we going to proceed in terms of making this decision? Are we going to wait until they bring us back this data so we can look at it, and then this is going to come back to the board for a full vote? Or how are we going to, because there's 4 options, but I think the data you bring back will help us make a more informed choice on which one of these would be best.
Well, I see a couple different options. One is, based on our feedback this evening, the administration work to bring us a recommendation which includes questions that we have asked tonight. So that seems to be the simplest way that we would do that.
Mr. Baker, members of the board, that's exactly what we were thinking. In addition to, I know Dr. Rausch has prepared a briefing document that we can share with the board as well, to give you a little bit more detail, information compared to what you've received in this brief presentation, but also the information that you've requested from us. We can provide that information. We've got until June 30th to make this decision, so we've got plenty of time to provide you all with whatever information you need in order to make an informed decision, by that deadline. But I would not suggest we wait until that June 30th deadline.
Yeah.
I would suggest that we have this on the agenda maybe for the first or second board meeting in June, so that we have plenty of time to get the information to you and have plenty of time to make that decision before the deadline and get the information to whoever we need to get it to once that decision's been made by you.
Thank you. Board Member Gibbs?
Yeah, June 30 sounds like tomorrow. But when you bring back the information, can you ask the ESC if their Business Advisory Council is already set, or is there an opportunity for districts to add to their council someone who would best represent, or someone that we would want to be on there to kind of make a good composition, so we know someone is looking out, or someone is there specifically that can address the concerns of urban districts like our own?
To President Baker, to Board Member Gibbs, I will ask the ESC that question to see if it's been set in stone, who they already have on there, who's represented, who's attending from those who are represented. So for instance, if let's say it's nationwide, and I throw nationwide out because they're big and they're up the street, and I see their tower every day. Who's from Nationwide? What division? Who are the individuals? They're a big player, but I think also what I've heard from the board is that who are the small business players that are on here as well, and do we have a more diverse? And so the questions are diversity in a number of areas, in a number of ways, and can we add to that? So you've got this core, say, of however many. If we say, look, you're missing X, Y, and Z, we think that you should add them. Is there an opportunity for us to have them added to that Business Advisory Council? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and it's to find out those two things. And you said something, and you said it very quick. You said of the 20 districts served by the ESC, 18 have done what?
So of the 28 districts served by the ESC, 18 have already passed resolutions. So essentially they passed a resolution saying, we want to use the ESC's Business Advisory Council, which would be the action that this board would take should you choose the ESC. You would say, we wish to take the Business Advisory. So 18 of the 28 have said yes.
To the ESC option?
To the ESC option.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
2 have said no, we're doing our own thing, and that's Dublin and Chillicothe. And then the other remaining 8, one of which is us, in conversations I've had with him, he believes that at least another 4 or 5 they're just awaiting that kind of meeting to pass that resolution, and I think that there's another 1 or 2 that we still don't quite know what they're doing yet. But it's quite a few of, it's a pretty large contingent of the ESC, and they stretch to Ross County, to Licking, Delaware, Union, and then Franklin, obviously.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Board Member Hudson?
Thank you, President Baker. I guess I would suggest, and I understand where we're coming from, I wouldn't think we could be very prescriptive with the ESC in terms of our own person or an urban person, but I would think it's more needs, like instead of a small business person, somebody who helps on entrepreneurial issues and entrepreneurship. So that could be any number of folks, but it's more the ESC. It's the ESC's job to fill that, and then we evaluate are they getting the job done. And then, but that we would like to make sure that they are focusing on representation that would focus on urban issues, women and minorities, that kind, and have diverse representation on the council. So it isn't, no offense to some of my colleagues, a bunch of white guys, that it's a diverse committee. And so I think see how they do it, and then they either perform or we do our own thing. But that's what I think they probably would say, we have 20-some districts, they can't all point somebody. And then, but I think we say, here are our expectations, can you meet them?
I think we can ask.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think we ask, and I think when you bring the information back and we look at what they have, we can find out if they'd be open to it or not. And if they say no, then fine, I think you're fine.
Yeah, because I think, for example, the Chamber yes, thank you. The Chamber of Commerce is now kind of tooled for entrepreneurship, and they do a lot more than one small business could do, but it's about all kinds of services for small businesses, and that would be more of that mindset.
Yeah. The only difference, thank you, the only difference is that business is just business, and entrepreneurs are people who aspire to do it, whereas education is comprised of students that are here, and you can't control which students we have. They're a captive audience, and so because they're captive, if no one else advocates for that representation, then it doesn't happen. And so as opposed to people on the chamber side who can say, these are people who want to be in business. Kids just have to be in school. It's compulsory. So I think just when you bring the data back, it'll shed some light on what's there and kind of what's not, and we can kind of ask from there. But I don't mind asking for everything for my kids, so, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Rausch.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's nothing further then on the Business Advisory Council discussion, let's move on to our consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion that we adopt the consent agenda as presented. And is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions on any piece of legislation contained within the consent agenda this evening? Mr. Peretti.
Just real quick, 2 things. One is a thank you for the $15,000 from Lauren Hayes for Afrocentric. Thank you very much. And the $1,600 from Arthur and Nadia Holloway for South High School. just thank you very much. But my second question was, at our board meeting, and maybe you could help me out with this, Board Member Brown, we had our policies that were up that we needed to get updated, a lot of state and federal stuff that we have to constantly keep up to date. And we had our first hearing at the last board meeting, and normally when we adopt policies, they're here. So did we forget them?
Podium.
President Baker, to Board Member Peretti, very simply, I think this is just, I'll take the mea culpa. I believe that when we put together the agenda, I meant to move everything and kind of migrate it over. And fortunately for me, I've been on vacation, and so I kind of missed that.
Okay.
But it's I'll take the mea culpa on that one, so.
Okay.
No, sorry, I chair the committee,
So
so that's mine.
joint mea culpa.
We'll fix it
Next meeting.
next meeting.
Thank you. And make sure we just put in a deadline and then a process because I know we had some questions on the policies, and a lot of this stuff that we're getting caught up on, as Board Member Brown could say, are a lot of stuff that we have to do that's done by the revised code or the federal government, changing things and doing things and updating things. If we do have a deadline for board members to ask questions and offer amendments, I think that would be helpful so that we're all on the same page and that we all have a deadline to look at the policies and expect them to be voted on at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Peretti. Mr. Brown?
Just quickly in response, I can tell you that we did talk about people getting their comments or questions to me when we discussed these at the last board meeting. I've not heard anything from anybody, but knowing that it's going to be on the next agenda, plan for that. And if you do have questions or comments, please get them to me. Secondly, with respect to another item on the agenda, 11.1, which has to do again with the Facilities Task Force. Just wanted to suggest a very small change in the language in the resolution. It's something that I did not catch the last time when this was on the agenda. That would have been back February 20th, I guess. But in the last of the recitals, where it says, board charged the superintendent to create the task force, et cetera, and present to the Board of Education recommendations for school consolidations. I would suggest that to correspond to the policy 7105, which is a policy on school closings, that we insert the words closings and consolidations. I want to make sure that the task force and everybody involved clearly understands that that's part of what they are, perhaps a significant part of what they're actually doing. And the 7105 criteria are criteria to consider and apply in the event of school closings. So I don't think that it's inconsistent with anything else that we've done. I just wanted to suggest that we add those words.
Mr. Brown, thank you for that.
I know there was also a very minor change to the recital immediately above it, but it doesn't change any real substance.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. What I would say to, and I saw your note to the board liaison today, so I had some time to think about this. When I look at that particular whereas clause, it refers specifically back to action that was taken on February 20th. And so this, what I would offer back to you is this language in this whereas clause is specifically the same. So
Well, in that case, let me amend and move that we amend the language both from February 20th and today so that those correspond and so that they correspond specifically to the board policy 7105.
Mr. Parliamentarian, is that allowable?
To Troublemaker Brown.
He's accustomed to that. Go on.
Yeah. For a resolution that has already passed the board, you would more than likely have to reconsider that and vote that out and then reissue the motion. This one is a simple amendment. Going backwards is a little bit more involved. We need to get our hands on that resolution number, reconsider it, and
All right, well,
in
I'm
essence,
not looking
in
to.
essence,
yeah.
unwind that transaction to then,
Yeah, that's enough, and yeah, I understand. Perhaps then we can just make that clear in other ways.
That makes sense to me. And Mr. Superintendent, do you have a comment?
Mr. Board President, to Mr. Brown, we can certainly do that when we share the charge of the committee. That's a part of one of the things that we're going to do next week at the meeting on the 12th, is to give the committee or the task force, to give them what the charge is for the committee's work, and we can certainly, emphasize that as a part of the charge.
Great.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Board Member Gibbs?
Yes, just want to say on 13.7, on the legislation to move on the International Institute for Restorative Practices. I want to commend everyone who's been involved in this. I had an opportunity to see the restorative practices in action, and we'll talk about that in some upcoming meetings, but that I think this will be really good for our students and for our staff to understand. So thank you, Ms. Ward, for the work you're doing, and for Bread for your unrelenting commitment to this work, and the many others who have come to us throughout the years that have asked us to look at a better way to work with students, to provide them opportunities to get redirected and to stay on the right path, and to stay in the classroom, and to stay on track, and to stay engaged in learning. And so really thank you for this work, and I think it's going to be a great start and another tool in our toolbox to help our students become successful. So thank everyone who was involved, and it's just the beginning. There's a lot of work ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Any other comments on the consent agenda, colleagues? Hearing none. Mr. Treasurer?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gibbs?
Oh, I just have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Before we close out, just, do we know did any of our buildings sustain any damage from the winds or from any of the storms that we had?
To Mr. President, to Ms. Gibbs, I'm going to turn to Ms. Maru to see if there have been any reports that, I'm not aware of any reports, but I'm turning to her to see if there are any reports that I'm not aware of.
We've had no reports of damage to any of our buildings. We did have some flooding on some of our grounds and in some of our fields, but nothing to the actual buildings that I'm aware of.
But we'll
Thank you.
Check that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that report, Dr. Stanford and Ms. Marood. Next, I will call on Mr. Peretti.
For announcements. Okay. So I just wanted to, Mr. Oldham's not here tonight, and I'll just have, just to reflect back on the agenda, see an Operation Fix It, but we will have finance next week, getting a first look at our 5-year forecast, as well as our non-personnel budget, happening at its regular time, unlike the personnel budget. We'll be having a first iteration of that. It'll come to the board. I encourage board members to come for that. The non-personnel budget's something that's been going on for the last few years now. We've got a really great process. And with that, reflecting on the board items tonight on Operation Fix It, I'm just really looking forward to seeing how our capital budgets will be looking like as we get later into the year. That is something that will be coming to Finance Committee, looking at our various buckets of dollars. So I just wanted to say thank you to all the staff. All right, you guys have been really working hard. That's all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Peretti. All right. One other thing that I thought we'd try to tackle this evening is trying to set a date for our board work session to discuss the superintendent search. I have Board Member Reyes' availability here. I do not have Board Member Hudson's availability here.
I think she did send out a message, I think, to us at one point with her availability.
Do you have that?
Let me see if I can pull it up.
All right. Also, on the search, you may recall one of the things that the board directed me to do was to reach out to the ESC to find a facilitator mediator, and I wanted to report back that I did do that, and the ESC has assigned Mr. Bill Reimer to fill that role for us. And I've got his schedule availability, so I'd like for him to be at our work session. So,
I do have her availabilities.
Okay.
Of April the 7th, 9th, 10th, 16th, and 17th.
all right, colleagues, I'm going to ask you to take out your calendars. All right, so Wednesday, this is not exciting. Wednesday, April 11th, and I'm thinking 5 or 5:30.
Is 11 open?
It doesn't work with Ms. Hudson.
Okay.
11?
Okay.
We do 7th, 9th, 10th, 16th, 17th are the dates that I have in the immediate future
So
from
let's-
her availability.
So let's start at 16 or 17.
Okay, so 17th is
Board meeting.
that's a board
So
meeting.
we should probably concentrate there on the 16th. That's
So Monday, April 16th. Is everyone available? Monday,
Looks
April
great.
16th?
We're at
Good to
16.
me.
It works for
Does it work for Ramona?
Board Member Reyes.
Works for Hudson.
Let me check and make sure it works for our facilitator. It does. Does Monday, April 16th work for all board members?
Yes.
That's great.
Okay, I appreciate.
time?
5 or 5:30? What's the preference?
5:30, please.
Traffic is just insane.
16th,
No, to be here at 5 o'clock.
5:30?
5:30 is good.
Okay, all right, I appreciate your patience. It's easier to do that when we're all together.
Yes.
All right, so that's that done. I will also call on Ms. Gillison to talk about Children's Day. Not to put you on the spot, Ms. Gillison, but you're on the spot.
Thank you, President Baker, to members of the board and the listening audience. Children's Day will be May 12th, and the hours from Children's Day will be 10 to 1, and we have 6 locations: East High School, Marion Franklin High School, Walnut Ridge High School, Columbus North International, Columbus Global. That's 5. Yes.
Is West High School?
And West High School, thank you. Yes. So once again, that was West High School, Marion Franklin, Columbus North International, Columbus Global, East, and Marion Franklin High Schools. We will be hosting National Children's Day, May 12th, from 10 to 1. All types of activities, activities focused around literacy, activities focused around fun and activities, scholarship applications, information around career tech. We're partnering with Nationwide Children's Hospital. They're a sponsor this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun. May 12th, 10 to 1, and you can find that information tomorrow on our website.
Thank you, Ms. Gillison. That's a great day. Thousands of community members go into our schools every year on that day. It's just an outstanding day. Ms. Gibbs.
Yes. So next Tuesday, April 10th, is the Innovation and Reform Committee meeting at 5:30 at Columbus Downtown High School. As you know, we've embarked upon the work of the Nashville Academies. There's been numerous districts around the country that have implemented the Nashville Academies, and right here in Ohio, Akron has implemented the Nashville Academy model. So on Tuesday, we will have a presentation from the Akron City School Director of their Director of Secondary Education, their Director of School Improvement, and the coordinator of their Akron Academies program, and a teacher that teaches in that program. They'll be staying, they're in town for another conference, and so we'll have the opportunity to talk to them and to talk to them about the Nashville Academies, how they implemented them, and some best practices and lessons learned from bringing those type of focus high school programs to their district. And then the second presentation will be from our our own Pegeen Cleary about our programs in our vocational education department and tech and adult workforce education, and how we can find synergy between the programs we already offer and what Akron decided to focus on in their academies, as well as Nashville in their focus academies. There are a number of YouTube videos online. So if you go to the Academies of Nashville as a part of Nashville School District, you will see about their 14 or 15 high schools. Each one of them have a specific focus, and all freshmen are a part of their academy. So we're continuing this work. After we decide what buildings to build, we want to have great programs to go in them. And so the work of innovation and reform is to look at what those next generation program, hey, y'all too, the next generation program and offerings will be for our students. So if you want to come and be a part. Next Tuesday, April 10th, we'll be there at 5:30, but we will be out by 7 to get to the West High School dedication of the cupola. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs.
Are we on point of pride, too?
Yes, ma'am.
Want to thank,
I did give you permission to do that.
yes, you did. And I did it.
Yeah.
Want to congratulate the students that woke up very early this morning at about 6:30 from our Columbus City School Ambassadors Program and students from Columbus Alternative that did a college tour at the University of Toledo today. And tomorrow they'll be going to the Denison. So they're spending their spring break looking at where they're going to spend their future. So congrats to all of those students and to all of the students that took advantage of their spring break. I wish it was warmer and no snow, but at least there's no school, right? You get a snow day. You get a snow day. You get a snow day.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Gibbs. Any other announcements, or Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. Very briefly, wanted to send a warm shout out to Mr. Richard Crockett and family for their All-Stars Easter egg hunt and basketball tournament that took place just this past Saturday at Howard Recreation Center, where we had a number of our students present, even some staff who were present at that event. It was wonderful to attend. Also want to give a shout out to any of our students in the district who were accepted to the College Credit Plus program. So very excited about that. It is a major point of pride for myself in that my own daughter was accepted as an oncoming, well, is she a freshman now? Lord have mercy, I'm getting old. Okay, so yeah, she's a sophomore now, but next year she'll be attending Columbus State Community College for College Credit Plus. But it's a point of pride not just for her, but for every student that got that acceptance letter in the mail. I'm really excited for each and every one of them as well. Thank you for the staff for, again, just making this something that is available, and we have mentors and folks on staff who are able to help guide our students through this process. I'm really excited for all of our students who got that letter.
Thank you. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order this evening, the chair will entertain a motion that we adjourn. Actually, I'm going to call on the Vice President to offer a motion. That's right.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to offer a motion that we adjourn.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lord have mercy. I told you I'm getting old. Okay. I am. Lord have mercy. Okay. It is recommended that the Board of Education recess into executive session per sections 121.22 G1 Ohio Revised Code to consider the employment or compensation of public employees or officials.
No. Legal matter?
Legal meeting with attorneys for the legal counsel for the board to discuss pending or imminent litigation.
What's the section?
Okay.
Bear with
the
us.
wrong one?
Bear with us just a moment.
Yep.
Withdraw that motion then.
Yep. I withdraw the motion. And I have it even on the agenda here as well, that it's 121.22 G1.
Still on spring break.
While we're waiting, I want to do a shout out to the Columbus City Preparatory School for Boys and the Coalition of 100 Black Men with John Jackson and March Hachter,
That's right.
who purchased an entire movie theater so that their class could see Black Panther as at Easton Town Center as a part of their spring break kickoff for doing well. So thank you to, again, community partners that really support our kids. The gentleman had a good time, and it was a great movie had by all. So glad that we had the chance to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Mr. Vice President?
Make it bigger. All right. Absolutely. Okay, Mr. President, we are ready.
Yes, sir.
Motion to. Thank you. I recommend motion that we recess into executive session per section 121.22G3 to conference with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Mr. Treasurer, when you're ready. Thank you, sir. Take your time.
Vice President Cole.
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Peretti?
Yep.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Sure.
Got that. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. The board will now recess into executive session. We'll adjourn from there without returning to these chambers. Have a good evening. Thank you.